Have you ever scrolled through a used truck listing late at night, punched in your budget, and found yourself staring at a Scania with 800,000 kilometers on the clock selling for less than a decent used pickup truck? Because if you have spent any time looking at the international used truck market, you already know that Scania has a peculiar relationship with depreciation. Or more accurately, a peculiar resistance to it on one end of the market and a peculiar affordability on the other. The high-spec, low-mileage examples hold their value with a grip that makes fleet managers wince at trade-in time, but the older, higher-mileage units, the trucks that have already done their hard decades of work in European logistics or Scandinavian winter routes, reach a price point that looks almost impossible given what is still sitting under the hood and behind the cab. And here's the thing that experienced buyers know and first-time shoppers find genuinely hard to believe. Those trucks, the ones selling for the price of a decent riding lawnmower in some markets, can run for another million kilometers if you bought the right one and you know what to look for. Not every one of them, not without maintenance, not without understanding what you're buying and what it needs, but the ones built during Scania's engineering peak with the right engines, the right configurations, and a documentable service history represent a category of used truck value that is almost unique in the commercial vehicle world. So today we are going through 5 specific Scania trucks, real models, real specifications, real market realities that represent the best of what the used Scania market offers to buyers who know what they are doing. The ones that cost almost nothing by commercial vehicle standards, and the ones that, in the right hands with the right approach, simply never die. Stick around because this one is going to change how you look at the used truck market. Hey everyone, Travis Walker here. Titan Haulers coming at you from my shop in Amarillo. Now, most of you know I run American Iron. Peterbilt is home for me, always has been. But I have been getting a consistent stream of questions in the comments and the inbox about the used Scania market, specifically from owner-operators and small fleet operators, looking at tight budgets and asking whether these trucks represent real value or whether they are a parts nightmare waiting to happen. And I will be honest with you, as I always am on this channel, I have done the research, I have talked to operators running these trucks, and I have spent time with the mechanical side of several of these models in shop environments. What I found was more interesting than I expected, so tonight we are going through 5 specific Scania models that consistently show up at the bottom of the price range and the top of the reliability discussion. Let us get into it. Before we get into the 5 specific trucks, we need to spend a few minutes on why Scania's reputation for longevity is real, rather than marketing mythology. Because understanding the engineering foundation is what allows you to make a smart buying decision rather than just taking someone's word for it. Scania's approach to truck engineering has been built around a modular system for decades. The same core engine architecture, the same transmission family, the same axle and suspension components appear across multiple generations of trucks and configurations that are designed to be serviced, rebuilt, and returned to service rather than replaced. This philosophy is not universal in the commercial vehicle industry. Some manufacturers engineer trucks around a total cost of ownership model that assumes replacement rather than rebuilding at high mileage. Scania's model has historically assumed that the truck itself is a long-term asset, and the engineering reflects that assumption at a fundamental level. The result is an engine family, particularly the inline-6 and V8 units produced from the early 1990s through the mid-2000s, that has a documented track record of surviving well past the mileages at which many competing engines require major intervention. Scania's DC series engines, and specifically the DC-11, DC-12, and DC-12 and DC-16 units that powered the 4 Series and early R Series trucks, are engines that experienced operators and mechanics discuss with genuine respect. Not because they are maintenance-free, they absolutely are not, but because when they are maintained correctly, they demonstrate a durability that earns the reputation over millions of kilometers of real-world operation. The other factor is parts availability. Scania's global presence and their long-standing commitment to supporting older vehicles through their parts network means that a Scania from the late 1990s or early 2000s is not an orphan in the parts market. The way some older trucks from manufacturers who have exited certain markets or discontinued certain platforms can be, parts exist, they are available through the global Scania network, and the aftermarket has developed alongside the original network in ways that provide competitive pricing on high-demand items. With that foundation understood, let us get into the 5 trucks. The 4 Series ran from 1995 to 2004, and in that period, Scania produced a truck that hit a sweet spot between old-school mechanical simplicity and modern performance that makes it uniquely valuable in the used market today. The 114L specifically, powered by the DC-11 engine in configurations ranging from 340 to 380 horsepower, represents the entry point into used Scania ownership that makes the most sense for a buyer who wants genuine reliability at the lowest possible acquisition cost. These trucks are now old enough that the depreciation curve has fully played out. The examples showing up in the used market are priced on their condition and their remaining service life rather than on any residual brand premium. And in good condition with a documented service history, a 4 Series 114L can be found for figures that seem almost impossible given the mechanical substance you're buying. What you're getting mechanically is a DC-11 engine that in the 340 to 380 horsepower specification is running well within its design envelope. Scania engines that are not pushed to their maximum output rating tend to last longer than those running at the top of the power range, and the 114L's modest power output relative to the engine's capability means the internals have been living a less stressed life than the higher output variants. The pre-emissions mechanical injection system on the oldest 4 Series units is a specific advantage for buyers who need to operate in markets with limited specialist diagnostic capability because there's no common rail system, no complex electronic fuel management, and no particulate filter to manage. A competent diesel mechanic with conventional diagnostic skills and basic tooling can work on this engine effectively, which is not true of every modern truck platform. What to look for when buying. Frame condition is critical on any truck of this age. Inspect the chassis rails carefully for corrosion, cracks at the crossmember attachments, and any evidence of previous repairs that were not done to the original specification. Cab condition on a 4 Series tells you a lot about how the truck was operated. Because cab mounting issues and corrosion around the hinge points are common on high mileage examples and can be expensive to address properly. The gearbox on these trucks, typically the GRS 900 series, is robust, but inspect the shifting quality carefully as worn synchronizers are a known issue on high mileage units. The price range in the current European used market for a solid 4 Series 114L with documented history runs from a few thousand to around 15,000 euros, depending on condition and specification. In North American import markets, the price is higher due to logistics costs, but the mechanical value proposition remains. The R Series launched in 2004 and ran through to 2016, winning the International Truck of the Year award in 2005 and establishing a reputation that held up across the entire production run. The R420, powered by the DC-12 engine producing 420 horsepower, sits in the middle of the R Series power range, in a position that combines genuine capability with the durability advantages of not running the engine at its maximum output. The DC-12 is one of the most respected truck diesel engines produced in the modern era. It is a 12-liter inline-six that combines displacement with precision engineering in a way that produces not just strong performance, but the kind of deep-breath reliability that operators who run high mileages value above almost any other characteristic. Documented examples of DC-12 engines running past 1.5 million kilometers without a major overhaul exist in sufficient numbers to be statistically meaningful rather than anecdotal. That is not luck. That is engineering. The R420 generation introduced a cab quality step up from the 4 Series that is immediately apparent to anyone who spends time in both trucks. The Highline and Topline cab options on the R Series offer a sleeping and living environment that holds up as comfortable and practical even by current standards, which matters for operators who are going to spend extended periods in the vehicle. The ergonomics of the control layout, the quality of the seat, and the noise insulation in the R Series cab are areas where the investment shows clearly. In the used market, early R420 examples from the 2005 to 2008 period are currently priced in a range that reflects their age and mileage honestly without yet reaching the distressed pricing of the older 4 Series. This is arguably the sweet spot of the used Scania market right now. Old enough to be genuinely affordable, recent enough to be fully supported by the current Scania parts network, and equipped with an engine that has a track record long and well documented enough to buy with confidence given proper pre-purchase inspection. What to look for when buying? The EGR system on Euro 4 and Euro 5 R420 examples requires attention. EGR cooler issues are a known failure point on these trucks, and a pre-purchase inspection should include a coolant analysis to check for combustion gas contamination, which is the signature of an EGR cooler that is beginning to fail internally. The Opticruise automated gearbox, fitted to many R420 examples, is generally reliable, but the actuator unit is an expensive component that should be checked for smooth, consistent operation across all ranges before purchase. The G series, which ran alongside the R series from 2010 onward, is less celebrated than its stablemate, but represents exceptional value in the used market for a specific reason that many buyers overlook. The G series was positioned as the working truck of the Scania range, prioritizing durability and operating economy over the premium cab appointments and high-power options that characterize the top specification R series. What this means in practice is that G series trucks were typically specified by operators who were serious about running costs and who maintain their vehicles with the discipline that serious operators apply. The G400, powered by the DC-13 engine at 400 horsepower, is a truck that was sold into vocational and long-haul applications where reliability and fuel economy were the primary purchase drivers. The DC-13 is the engine that replaced the DC-12 in the Scania lineup and continued the tradition of that unit's reliability in a more modern architecture that meets Euro 5 emission standards without the complexity of the SCR systems required for Euro 6 compliance. The lower cab specification of the G series relative to the R series translates into a lower price point in the used market, but the mechanical specification is essentially identical. You're buying the same engine, the same transmission options, the same axle and suspension components in a truck that costs less new and therefore costs less used. For an operator whose priority is mechanical reliability rather than cab luxury, this is an attractive proposition. What to look for when buying the G series chassis is generally well built, but inspect the rear air suspension components carefully on examples that have operated in harsh road conditions. The airbags and height control valves are wear items that can be costly to replace if they have been neglected. The cab tilt mechanism on G-Series trucks should be operated during inspection to confirm smooth, consistent hydraulic function, as this system is occasionally neglected in maintenance programs, and seized components can make routine engine access difficult and expensive to restore. Now we are getting into the territory that Scania enthusiasts get genuinely excited about, and for good reason. The R500 V8, powered by the DC-16 engine in its 500 horsepower specification, is a truck that sits at the intersection of legendary mechanical reputation and real-world affordability in the current used market in a way that represents one of the most compelling value propositions in any segment of the commercial vehicle world. The DC-16 V8 is the engine that Travis mentioned in the Scania versus American Trucks video on this channel. The engine that European drivers talk about the way some people talk about sports cars. The one with a specific exhaust note that is immediately recognizable and that Scania has leaned into as a prestige product throughout the V8's production history. In the R500 specification, the DC-16 is producing 500 horsepower from 16 liters of displacement, which means it is running at a modest output relative to its maximum capability of 730 or 770 horsepower in higher specifications. A DC-16 running at 500 horsepower is an engine that is, in engineering terms, barely trying. The internal stresses, the combustion temperatures, the bearing loads, all of the variables that determine long-term engine durability are proportionally lower in the 500 horsepower specification than in the 730 or 770 horsepower variants. Operators who understand this buy R500 V8 trucks specifically because they are getting the legendary DC-16 architecture in its most relaxed and therefore most durable state of tune. The sound alone has commercial value in certain markets. Truck shows, enthusiast events, owner-operator identity building. These are real considerations for a segment of the market that cares about what their truck represents, as well as what it does. And the V8 badge on the grille of a well-maintained R500 still generates the kind of reaction from people who know trucks that a specification sheet alone never produces. What to look for when buying the DC-16 is an expensive engine to overhaul, so pre-purchase compression testing and oil analysis are non-negotiable. A healthy DC-16 with documented service history is a bargain. A DC-16 with deferred maintenance and unknown history is a liability. The turbocharger system on V8 examples is more complex than the inline-6 units and should be inspected for shaft play and seal condition. Budget for a thorough inspection from a Scania specialist before committing, because the due diligence cost is trivial relative to the potential repair cost of buying a compromised example. The streamlined specification, introduced as a mid-cycle update to the R Series in 2013, represents the peak of the pre-new generation Scania's development and the single model that most consistently combines all of the qualities that make used Scania ownership compelling into one package. The R480 Streamline, powered by the DC-13 engine producing 480 horsepower with the full aerodynamic bodywork package that the Streamline name describes, is a truck that delivers fuel economy numbers, reliability credentials, and remaining service life in a combination that explains why experienced used truck buyers target it specifically when it appears in the market. The aerodynamic improvements of the Streamline specification are not cosmetic. They represent a genuine reduction in fuel consumption at highway speeds that Scania documented and that operators have confirmed in real-world operation. For a used truck buyer who is going to run this vehicle on long-haul routes, the fuel economy improvement that the Streamline bodywork delivers compounds into meaningful savings across the operating life of the truck in a way that justifies paying a modest premium over a non-Streamline R480 at purchase. The DC-13 in 480 horsepower specification is an engine that has accumulated enough real-world operating history by now to be bought with confidence given a proper inspection. Examples built between 2013 and 2016 are currently reaching the price points in the European used market that represent genuine value for a truck with this specification level. And the combination of Euro 6 emissions compliance, modern cab appointments, and the DC-13's documented reliability makes the R480 Streamline the single most compelling used Scania proposition available right now for a buyer who can navigate the purchase process intelligently. What to look for when buying? Euro 6 emissions compliance means a full SCR and DPF system that requires attention. Check the AdBlue dosing system for correct function. Inspect the DPF for ash loading status and confirm that the SCR catalyst is functioning within specification. These systems are manageable in operation but expensive to repair if they have been abused or neglected. The OptiCruise gearbox on Streamline examples should be checked for software update status, as Scania released calibration updates for this generation that improve shift quality and fuel efficiency and should be applied if not already done. Here's the part of the used Scania conversation that determines whether your purchase becomes the reliable workhorse these trucks are capable of being or an expensive lesson in due diligence. The buying process matters as much as the model selection, and Travis will tell you that cutting corners here is where used truck purchases go wrong regardless of the brand. A pre-purchase inspection by a qualified Scania technician is not optional. It is the foundation of a smart used truck purchase at any price point. And the cost of a thorough inspection is trivial relative to the cost of discovering a major mechanical issue after the purchase is complete. The inspection should include a full engine diagnostic scan, compression testing, oil and coolant analysis, hydraulic system check, brake system inspection, and a thorough examination of the chassis and cab structure. Service history documentation is the other non-negotiable. A Scania with a complete, verifiable service record from a Scania dealer or qualified independent specialist is a fundamentally different proposition from one with gaps, missing records, or undocumented ownership periods. The service history tells you how the previous owners treated the truck, which tells you what the truck's remaining life is likely to be. Pay a premium for complete documentation. Walk away from incomplete records unless the price reflects the uncertainty. And finally, import logistics for North American buyers. The regulatory pathway for importing a European truck into the United States requires navigating federal motor vehicle safety standards and EPA emissions compliance, and the specifics vary depending on the age and specification of the vehicle. Older trucks may qualify for exemptions that newer trucks do not. Working with an import specialist who understands commercial vehicle compliance, specifically, not just passenger vehicle imports, is essential for getting a European Scania onto American roads legally and without expensive surprises. Here's the part of the used Scania conversation that the enthusiast forums and the YouTube comment sections tend to gloss over because it is less exciting than talking about legendary V8 engines and million-kilometer service lives. But that determines whether the purchase works out financially or becomes an expensive education. The hidden costs, the ones that do not appear in the listing price and that first-time buyers consistently underestimate until they are already committed to the truck. Start with the import costs for North American buyers, because this is where the gap between the European listing price and the actual landed cost of the truck is largest and most surprising. The listing price of a used Scania in the European market is the beginning of the financial conversation, not the summary of it. On top of that price, a North American buyer needs to account for international shipping, which for a commercial vehicle typically runs between $3,000 and $6,000 depending on origin, port, and destination, port handling, and customs clearance fees. import duties which vary depending on the truck's age and origin country, compliance modifications required to meet federal motor vehicle safety standards, and state registration costs that vary significantly depending on where the truck will be domiciled. The total of these costs can add $15,000 to $25,000 to the acquisition cost of a truck that was attractively priced in the European market. That is not a reason to avoid the purchase if the underlying value is there, but it is a reason to do the full landed cost calculation before falling in love with a listing price that looks impossibly good. Travis will tell you that the operators who end up disappointed with their used European truck purchases are almost always the ones who did not run the complete numbers before committing. Then there is the parts cost reality for the North American market specifically. Scania's global parts network is genuine and it functions well, but genuine Scania parts ordered through North American channels carry a price premium over what the same parts cost in Europe, where the dealer density and the competition between suppliers keeps pricing more competitive filters, where items and consumables are manageable. But major components, injectors, turbochargers, EGR components on Euro 4 and Euro 5 trucks, and transmission actuator units on Opticruise-equipped examples can carry price tags that require budgeting for seriously. The smart approach is to establish a relationship with a Scania dealer or independent specialist before the purchase rather than after. Understanding what the major service intervals require, what the high probability wear items are on the specific model and generation you're buying, and what those items cost in your market gives you the information you need to build a realistic operating cost model rather than discovering the numbers one expensive repair at a time. Here is the knowledge that separates the buyers who get the million-kilometer experience from the ones who get the expensive disappointment. It is not luck, and it is not just buying the right truck. It is a set of operational and maintenance practices that experienced Scania operators apply consistently, and that make the difference between a truck that lives up to its reputation and one that does not. The first practice is oil analysis. Regular used oil analysis, sending a sample to a laboratory at every oil change and tracking the results over time, is the single most powerful diagnostic tool available to an owner-operator running any high-mileage diesel engine. And it is especially valuable on a used truck with an unknown or partially known history. The analysis results tell you what is happening inside the engine before any external symptom is visible. Rising iron levels indicate bearing or ring wear. Coolant contamination shows up in the chemistry before it shows up as white smoke or a milky dipstick. Silicon spikes indicate air filter integrity issues. Operators who run oil analysis catch developing problems when they are inexpensive to address rather than when they have become catastrophic failures. The second practice is cooling system discipline. Scania's DC series engines are cooled by systems that are designed to specific coolant chemistry standards, and running the wrong coolant or allowing the coolant to degrade beyond its service life creates internal corrosion and deposits that attack cylinder liners, head gaskets, and water pump components over time. The operators who get the extraordinary service lives from these engines are universally disciplined about cooling system maintenance. Correct coolant type, correct concentration, regular testing with a refractometer, and complete system flushes at the manufacturer's specified intervals. It is not glamorous maintenance. It is the kind that pays off over hundreds of thousands of kilometers. The third practice is gearbox care on Opticruise-equipped trucks. The automated gearbox is a robust unit, but it is sensitive to the quality and condition of the transmission oil in ways that operators sometimes underestimate. Transmission oil that is degraded beyond its service life loses its protective film strength, and the shift actuator components that rely on that protection begin wearing faster than they should. The service interval for transmission oil on Opticruise units should be treated as a firm deadline rather than a guideline, and any shift quality changes, hesitation, hunting between gears, or unusual noises during shifting should be investigated immediately rather than monitored and deferred. The fourth practice is chassis inspection frequency. High-mileage trucks accumulate fatigue in the frame and the cab mounting structure that is not always visible until it has progressed to a point where repair is expensive and time-consuming. Operators running used Scania trucks long-term typically inspect the chassis at every major service interval, looking specifically at the frame rails around stress, concentration points, the cab mounting brackets, and the fifth wheel mounting structure. Catching a developing crack at 2 centimeters costs a weld repair. Finding it at 15 centimeters costs a frame section replacement. The inspection takes an hour. The difference in repair costs can be tens of thousands of dollars. And the fifth practice, the one that underlies all of the others, is record keeping. Every service, every repair, every parts replacement, documented with date, mileage, and parts specification, not just for the practical benefit of knowing what has been done and what is coming due, but for the value it creates at the point of resale. A used Scania with 5 years of your meticulous service records is a fundamentally more valuable asset than the same truck with a shoebox of mixed receipts and a rough memory of what was done when the documentation is not just organization. It is equity that you're building in the truck every time you update the record. So why do these trucks cost almost nothing and never die? The honest answer is the same one that comes up every time the conversation turns to Scania's engineering philosophy. These trucks were built to last, not as a marketing claim but as an engineering mandate that shows up in the metallurgy, the design tolerances, the modularity of the components, and the parts support infrastructure that keeps them serviceable decades into their working lives. The used market price reflects age and mileage honestly as markets do. But age and mileage in a well-maintained Scania means something different than they mean in a truck that was not built with the same longevity philosophy. The mileage on a healthy DC-12 or DC-13 is not the same kind of mileage as the same number on a lesser engine. It is a statement of proven durability rather than accumulated wear, and the buyers who understand that distinction are the ones finding extraordinary value in a used truck market that most people are not paying close enough attention to. Which of these 5 would you run, and have you ever owned a used European truck? Drop it in the comments below. We genuinely want to know. Thanks for watching Titan Haulers, and remember to subscribe for much more.